Hello, hello.
Fabrice. How are you?
Doing very well.
Great, great. You have a beautiful scenery in the back. Where are you these days?
I'm in Turks and Caicos.
Okay, great. It's the same time here, Eastern time, right?
Eastern time. In fact, it's a, 20-minute flight away from DR, like a 1-hour boat ride. It's very close.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been there during all this period?
I came here in March when I realized that Hollywood was right. New York was always where ground zero, where all the worst thing happens, whether you're in The Last of Us or Independence Day, you have to run away. And so I figured high density didn't make sense. And so I came down here and it's been great.
Makes a lot of sense. So this is your first live on Instagram. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. Just to give you a little background, and while we have some more people joining us. So we got very involved with the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in the Dominican Republic, thanks to our co-working and flexible office space platform, Thrive, where we're talking through right now. And we started an initiative like when this started for entrepreneurs to connect and older businessmen to give advice, share knowledge, share best practices. That turned into, we put it Palante Dominicana, to go forward. That turned into a series of lives over Instagram. We did about 12 to 13 lives. And then we had an idea to do a virtual demo day. So we had 37 different startups apply. And then our jury selected 8, which presented over a webinar that we did through Zoom. So we saw different startups, different stages, some in marketplaces that I know that you specialize in. And basically what, we're doing these to share knowledge, share best practices, and obviously you have a great reputation as an entrepreneur and angel investor, and it's great to touch base with you again. So thanks a lot for accepting our invitation, and just to give our audience a little bit of history. Fabrice Grinda is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor, named by Forbes to be the #1 angel investor in the world. Graduated economics from Princeton in '96. Went to work for McKinsey and then founded several companies. I have Outplan, OLX, Vinci, and then working with FJ Labs, have invested in over 600 startups. That's a very big number, so congratulations on that. And you have one of the things that I also wanted you to share with us today is your philanthropic efforts here in the Dominican Republic, which I know that you've had previous experience with. So thank you so much, Fabrice, and compliment me in whatever you think, and let's start.
Anna, thank you for having me. I like what you guys are doing. I mean, the reality is, if you're an angel investor or a venture capitalist, the way you're valuing startups, frankly, most of the time is Zoom calls and email anyway. So moving a demo day to doing it by Zoom actually kind of makes sense.
Great. So let's start with the philanthropic efforts that not a lot of people here in the Dominican Republic know. What were you doing when you were in Cabarete?
Yeah, so I started visiting Cabarete in 2005, and I moved and started living there in 2012. And I was there full time. I mean, full time really for me is still like 5 months a year. I'm still on the road a lot. And I had a plan to build a beautiful 200-acre project with like a mile of beachfront, where the idea was there's no business model. It's like a gathering point for entrepreneurs, people from academia, spiritual leaders, people who want to start the companies for free, like just hang out. Sadly, the project never got off the ground for a variety of reasons. But usually when I embed myself in a community, I try to be helpful to the community. And so I started funding a project called Dream Project, which funds the education of 10,000 kids in the DR, K through 12, and became one of their largest donor from the Dominican. At the same time, I helped build a tech center where all the local kids could have access to the internet and computers and online learning. And independently of that, at different initiatives, when issues would arise. So for instance, after one of the flooding, provided hundreds of mattresses and mosquito nets to the community, allowed people to crash at my house if they needed, and I've been really trying to be as helpful as I could. It's one of many philanthropic initiatives. I mean, I also fund University of the People to give people free education. I funded rest in peace medical debt in the U.S. to alleviate medical debt for the poor. I fund education for children in many emerging markets through EPIC, and I have many other philanthropic initiatives.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I'm sure all those recipients of these initiatives are very grateful, especially in places like Cabarete.
Yeah.
So going back to your history, when you define yourself, and we see you in other interviews, you say you're an entrepreneur and an angel investor, which I suppose one thing led to the other. And when I met you in Cabarete, I remember you saying how if we have Dominicans working in startups, and then there's like in Spanish we call it derrama. There's, so how do you see that happening, and what recommendations you have for entrepreneurs in developing countries such as ours?
So two different elements. So first of all, I've noticed that when there's a successful exit of a company in a given city or a given country, the people that come out of it, the top executives who make a lot of money, start becoming angel investors. But it actually is more than that, because then the employees, the programmers that are in the company realize, entrepreneurship is a valid path. So we saw it in New York. So if you go back to 98, 99, 2000, it was all Silicon Valley. Basically, tech was Silicon Valley. And New York, there was this little thing called Silicon Alley, but it was really tiny. It didn't really matter. But after Google bought DoubleClick for like $4.7 billion, all of a sudden, people were like, so Kevin Ryan started becoming an investor, so he became an angel, but then all of the engineers, all of the mid-level management, and frankly, a lot of younger people were like, oh, wow, I can be an entrepreneur in New York. And that's happened not just in secondary cities like Chicago, et cetera, in the US, but it's happened in other markets. And I've seen it in France, I've seen it in Sweden, I've seen it in Finland, but it's also been true in emerging markets. Like right now in Colombia, there's a startup called Rappi, which is absolutely crushing it, which is like an online food delivery and grocery delivery and many more things. It's like Uber Eats meets Instacart for Latin America. When they exit, it's going to completely kickstart the ecosystem in Colombia. And we've already seen it, frankly, in many ways in Colombia, because just their presence, their success, their visibility has led to the launch and growth of many, many companies in Colombia, which in the past, Latin American startups were really Brazil. Now, in terms of what my advice is, so it's a lot harder to build a startup in a place like the Dominican Republic. And the main reason, beyond the fact the market is smaller, is capital is not really available at the Series A and the Series B. So usually, you can actually get seed funding. You can find wealthy people, from the wealthy families like the Vicinis or whatever, can give you the first $500K, $250K, or $1 million. So can you get enough money to get going? Absolutely. But what's really missing is a tech ecosystem or a venture capital ecosystem where the next 5 million, 10 million is available. That doesn't really exist in most countries. And I don't just mean Dominican. It doesn't really exist in like most countries in Latin America. So I looked at Chile. Chile had this big initiative a few years ago called Startup Chile. And they created all these really cool startups, and they got the first 500K or $1 million. The problem is they were never able to get the next 5 or 10 million. So frankly, the recommendation there was like move to Brazil or move to the US. It wasn't if you wanted to scale. So what the conclusion is, it's not don't create startups. Absolutely, you can create startups. The first $1 million is typically available, but you have to do it in a much more capital efficient way. You expect that you need to reach profitability with that level of money, because you're not going to be able to get the next level of funding. And also, you need to think through when the exits are going to be. There's no stock market that's that developed where you have liquidity. There's not big M&A for people like Google and Facebook. And the thing is, you're not going to be in the priority list of any of the big potential American acquirers. And so valuation expectations will be lower. But it doesn't mean don't be an entrepreneur. I mean, the way we built Instacado, for instance, which is kind of a Dominican startup, is also kind of not a Dominican startup. We built the back office in the DR because we had amazing talent that was available at reasonable prices. So we had like 50 people in Santo Domingo and in Santiago, but then the revenues were all coming from Brazil. And so actually it ended up being a 100 million revenue company, but it actually is a Brazilian company. It just so happens we did the back office here. So that's one pretty good way of doing it. Clearly the historical quote unquote startups that have been built in the DR have really been more things like call centers and or outsourced dev shops, which kind of makes sense, by the way. I mean, you're in a market where capital is not that available. And so even if you're going after the local market, just be capital efficient.
Great. So basically, when you're looking at, when you say there's no Series A, Series B, is that middle market investment that's going to validate the investment for the angel investor that put up, let's say, the first million.
Yeah.
And we're not in the, you say like we're not in the target region or in the country or geographically or market wise where those Series A and B traditional investors would come and do that series. So basically you have to start making money with that first million.
Exactly. And the problem, look, by the way, the problem has nothing to do with the Dominican. It's purely population. You know, like the same reason Chile, Peru, et cetera, have not seen any significant venture capital is like when you're a US VC or where you're a big US company and you're thinking, where did I go to in Latin America? They see, oh, Brazil, 230 million people, Mexico, 110 million people, we go there. That's it. You know? Yeah. And so the problem is when you have 10 million people, regardless of how talented they are, that's just not going to be where the capital is going. That said, that's not to say there's not things the country cannot do to make entrepreneurship easier and better. There are a lot of things that can be done. More than happy to talk about those. But it really means, as an entrepreneur, you need to be capital efficient. You need to have amazing unit economics. You need to be profitable with the first million, for sure.
I have to ask you, so what are those things that you recommend for Dominican? I mean, yes, we can be a virtual assistants to, like, basically what you guys were doing with Instacarro here.
Well, it's more than virtual assistants. I mean, it's like the full tech team, product team. I mean, engineering team, and the people have stock options. They're they're entrepreneurs and they're well compensated. It's not just customer service. I mean, it's a real. It's the core of the operations. It's just not where the revenues are coming from.
Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Having the back office here. So what other things do you suggest for us to start building this ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem here in the DR with startups that can actually, scale and look at other markets and not be just, fixed on 10 million people?
Well, there are categories that are large enough that even with 10 million people, you can build a big business, right? Like, so if you think of the largest components of GDP, construction, so real estate, you can imagine Zillow, Trulia type models or Open Door type models working in the DR. Cars, right? Like, you can imagine that you could have successful car transaction companies like Carvana that can be built. Like, so there's some categories where even though it's only 10 million people, the average order value is high enough that it works. Now, in terms of recommendations for the government, by the way, I can tell you what not to do, right? Like, the intuition is, we should subsidize technology, et cetera. Like, that's actually not the correct answer, because the government, if you do that, the ones who are politically connected get the money and not the best deals, and the government is incapable of picking the winners. What the correct answer is you make it easy to create a company. You make it easy to hire people. You make it easy to fire people. You make it easy to close down the company. And by easy, it's both like I can create a U.S. Delaware C Corp online and for $200 in 10 minutes. I should be able to, you should not have to go and notary and apostille and massive lines and hire a lawyer and require permission or a business license. So it's like really simplify the company creation, but it's not just company creation. Bankruptcy needs to be easy, and if the company goes bankrupt, you should not be liable for the debt of the company, because if you don't have good bankruptcy law, it actually prevents people from taking risks, because otherwise they're going to be liable for it. And employment should be easier. Like, it should be easier to hire, it should be easier to fire, right? So it's fundamental things. Like, in general, I'd say, limit corruption, have an efficient legal system, and make things easy online and inexpensive.
Great recommendations of what not to do, which is very, we're actually doing. But we're in that path, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and there's a lot of things going on. If you ask right now, what's missing from the entrepreneurial ecosystem is investment. And that's what we're trying to do and put together for these startups. And the investors ask me the same question. So how am I, or when am I going to get my money back, even if I invest $5,000 or $10,000? And the truth is that we're expecting these companies to start making money in the next 3 to 5 years.
That's the only way. Frankly, it's the only way. You have to shoot for profitability.
Exactly. It's not in valuations or anything like that.
Yeah.
So in one of the last interviews that I saw that you did, you were talking about, so you're still actively investing, you are 70% into marketplaces, and you're looking at stuff that obviously is not going to be impacted by the coronavirus.
Well, yes and no, right? Like, so I'm not going to do something that's 100% impacted by Corona. So, I don't know, like a StubHub type business. I don't know when that comes back, right? Like, offline events, or you look at ClassPass or OpenTable, you saw the revenues drop 100%. I mean, that's crazy. But there are businesses that are impacted temporarily that are going to come back pretty quickly. Those were okay to invest in. And by the way, there are categories that are actually benefiting from Corona. I mean, online food ordering, e-commerce in general, online ordering, online procurement. Like, if you don't want to meet everything where you don't need to meet people in person, and it is accelerating. I mean, online gaming, we're not investing in gaming per se, but like obviously that's accelerating as well.
Yeah, and from your economic perspective, a country like ours that depends so much on tourism, free zones, mining, but I guess mining is going to be back up once commodity prices stabilize. Gold is going up. But what would your recommendation be to our government once because we don't know when people are going to start coming back in. Maybe when there's a vaccine or something like that.
Yeah, but my worry is that tourism is the slowest to come back, right? Like if I look at hospitality, hotels, etc., like I was looking at the Wuhan hotel occupancy. So now they've reopened Wuhan completely. And so in theory, it should come back, but it's only come back 33% of what it was before. So it's going to take a while. So I suspect, especially in tourism, the next 2 years are going to be pretty tight. And yes, I think, once you have a vaccine, that'll change, or if you have an effective treatment. So it's not just vaccine. If you can find a drug that you take and you're fine, that's also fine. The thing is, that's 12 months, 18 months in the future. So it's going to be tight for the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and look, who's going to be the first person who gets the vaccine, right? Like health workers, like doctors and nurses, et cetera. It's not us, the general public. So it'll be a while.
Definitely. So with your success investing, I know you have your very methodological way of looking at startups. You, from what I've learned, you don't do due diligence. You don't read rounds. You invest in the angel up to 100K, or is it 250?
It varies on the round. So I don't want to compete with the VCs. I find that the venture capitalists, the Andreessen, Sequoia, Greylock, they're my friends. And they invite me in their deals because they want my expertise when it comes to marketplaces. And in return, I invite them to all my deals, and all the deals that I invest in C, they go to A, and A to go to B. But that means I can't take a big check, otherwise it competes with them for allocation. So it's really based on the size. So at C, at pre-seed, it's like 250K. At seed, it's like 500K. At A, it's 750K. At B, it's 1 million. And at C, it's like 1.5 million. So and our average, and by the way, we're mostly seed investors. So last year we invested in 124 companies, and we invested 450K average, more or less.
You see, somebody there is saying that we do due diligence.
Well, the due diligence, so it depends what you mean by no due diligence. What I mean by no due diligence is we don't verify that the numbers you tell us are the real numbers. We don't go cross-reference your bank account. We don't do reference checks on the founders, because we found that often founders have really bad reference checks because they were not good employees. They were talking back to their boss. They were working at the startup at their job. The due diligence we do, which by the way is 2 1-hour calls, or one, is we ask you pointed questions on your background, your vision. We evaluate you as a founder. We evaluate the unit economics. We think through whether or not the valuation makes sense in light of the opportunity and attraction, whether or not it falls in line with our vision of the future. And we look at your financial model and your deck. But it's not due diligence in the sense that we're like checking your financials. And if you tell us you did 200K a month last month, we are going to believe you. We're not going to verify your bank account. I think that's what I mean. In theory, the due diligence is done by the lead VC. My experience is they don't do that much due diligence either. But also, we're investing so early. Like, there's nothing to due diligence, right? Like, it's a founder and idea. The site went live 3 months ago. What the hell do you want to diligence? It's like, do I believe in you and the idea or not?
Great. So when you're investing in these rounds, you never invest alone, or when it's pre-seed, you actually do something alone, or it's never alone?
No, so it's never alone. Now, pre-seed is a little bit different. But pre-seed is basically at launch or pre-launch. There's no lead. Like most VCs in the US have raised so much money, they don't do seed, let alone pre-seed. So they're very, very few. So seed these days pre-seed these days in the US, you're raising one at 3 or 4 or 5 billion valuation. And often it's what we'd call a party round, where it's a whole bunch of angels, like it's 20 people putting 50K. And in that case, it's very possible that we'll be putting the biggest check. It'll be like 220K or something like that. But we wouldn't be alone. They'd be raising one, of which would be 220. But even then, very often we'd invest with what we'd consider pre-seed funds, like people like Amplify or Four. There's not very many of them, but there are a few we'd co-invest with. But pre-seed, our centers are really high. I mean, for us to be willing to pull the trigger pre-launch or at launch, okay, we really need to have incredible faith. So if I look at bread and butter for us, I say seed. Like last year, we did 124 deals. And pre-seed is less than 10 of that.
Okay. A lot of entrepreneurs were very wary when they were looking at a virtual demo day, and I just said, go online and type demo day on YouTube and you'll find a billion ideas.
Yeah.
They're really worried that somebody's going to steal their ideas. How much is an idea worth to Fabrice?
Zero. If you came to me and you told me you had the best idea in the world, no one's come up with it, etc., ideas are not worth the paper they're written on. The genius is in the execution. And by the way, if you think you're right, what is the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is they overestimate competitive risk and they underestimate execution risk. It's all about your ability to execute the idea. And think about who won in the major categories. Facebook was not the first social network. There was not only Friendster and MySpace before that, but there was Tagged, High Five. There was like 20 of them. Think of search engines. Like before Google, there was AltaVista, but Lycos, Yahoo. I mean, there's like 20 of them. It's really all about execution. Like you don't want to be the first at something. You want to be the best at something. And in fact, in a way, you want to be the last to do it at scale to the point that no one else can come before you. So it's not last mover advantage per se. But yeah, I would not. Ideas are what I would give someone of a company for an idea that I ended up building, maybe 1%. And that's not a good thing, you know.
Yeah, that's in a good mood on the beach.
Yeah, exactly. No, ideas. Don't worry about people taking your idea. In fact, the businesses we build and invest in, they don't have barriers to entry. Like when I launched OLX, anyone else could build OLX. What mattered, the barrier to entry is your execution, the customer relationships that you build, the brand that you build, the team that you build, the partnerships that you build, and eventually in things like marketplaces, network effects, right? Like so, ever more buyers with more sellers, and more sellers with more buyers, and then you get that loop where no one can come in. But day zero, there's no barrier to entry.
And you think marketplaces, now that you mention it, are going to start going into verticals you mentioned in a previous interview. Like right now, it would make a lot of sense for a marketplace of PP&E, for example, of all personal protective equipment, stuff like that. Do you think that's a future for marketplaces?
Well, I don't know about PP&E specifically, but verticals for sure. The observation is that if you build a site that covers many categories, your user experience is pretty good, but it's not going to be great. And if I take one specific category, I can create an amazing experience for that category. And usually you also change the business model. The horizontals often are like a listing model, or both sides need to do a lot more work. Like imagine I go to Upwork, which is a horizontal for remote work, and I want to hire a developer. I say I need a developer, and then 200 people apply, and I need to interview them. It's a lot of work. It's a pain. If I go to Thumbtack and I want to hire a plumber, 200 people apply. I need to pick one. If I go to Craigslist, I mean, it's so much work. The verticals, you could just say, hey, I need this. The vertical says this is the person for you, and boom, they can take 10, 15%. They can curate the experience. They appear to be the provider, and payment is integrated. I mean, StubHub, before they existed, tickets were being sold on Craigslist and eBay, but there was no seating map. There was no e-ticket integration. There was no authentication of the tickets. It didn't make sense. Or Airbnb. Before Airbnb existed, you could sublet on Craigslist, but it was horrible. No calendar, no payments, no trust and safety, no insurance. And so you can create a much better experience. So these, of course, are two very large categories that have been done already. But in verticals, everything remains to be done. We're still at the very, very beginning. And it's not just verticals of eBay and Craigslist. It's verticals of Thumbtack, verticals of Upwork, frankly, verticals of Uber Eats. We're investors in a pizza online ordering company and a Chinese food online ordering company and many, many others.
And that's the only thing that you can order through those companies, either pizza or Chinese.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, the reason it makes sense, most people are like, wait a minute, I can order on Uber Eats or Seamless Grubhub. Why do I need that? But don't put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. Put yourself in the shoes of the provider. If you're Luigi, the pizza store owner, what do you want to do? You want to cook pizza. What do you not want to do? Create a website, answer questions on Yelp and TripAdvisor. You don't want to deal with like packaging. So those companies, they do all of the back office. And so the verticals that we back, very often, it's not just a vertical consumer experience. It's a vertical B2B provider experience. So we often offer a free SaaS tool to the supply side, so they're embedded and you make their life easier, because it fits in my vision of the future of work. The future of work is you, the worker, only do the things that you love to do. And the thing you love to do, if you're a pizza store owner, is cook pizza. If you're a photographer, you want to take photos. So Miro is a B2B marketplace. Miro does acquisition, invoicing, post-processing, editing, like everything. And all the photographer needs to do is take photos. And so providing tools to the supply so they can just do their job to then provide a better experience to the demand side is absolutely, I guess, a trend right now.
Great. So I know you don't have a lot of time, and really thank you. Let's before we go into I have two questions here. Before we go into that, we've talked a lot on the entrepreneur side. Potential angel investors that want to up their game. I know you have something in angel list. Can you just say if somebody wants to invest with you or anything like that, what's the process and how you work with them?
Yeah, so we have a friends and family and entrepreneurs fund on AngelList, but we're not. I don't know the exact rules about solicitation, so I know I cannot publicly say come and invest with you or whatever. But like, if you follow us there on AngelList, it's like FJ Labs or Fabrice Grinda and Jose Marin funds like that. Just follow us, and whenever there's a fund or investment opportunity available, which is we do one a year. So every year we create a fund, which it will invest in 100 companies of that year. And so every investment I do, you will get a part of, or like pro rata. And this way, and you also get to see how we think and deal flow. So it's pretty cool because you get to see like 100 investments that we do every year. Yeah, just follow us at AngelList, and whenever there's a new fund, and as I said, there's one a year, you can invest with us.
Great. So here's one question. She's asking, which has been the most complex project that you have financially supported for an entrepreneur? 600 probably much.
I have to think about it because it's 600 companies. A lot of things are complex, right? The question is, where does the complexity come from? Is the complexity that you need to raise a lot of money in a market where it's not necessarily available? Is the complexity on execution because you're a let's say, three-sided marketplace and you need to match it? Or because in order to build a marketplace, you need to build a lot of tools before then. So there are a whole bunch of different types of complexity. The most complex. I need to think about it. I'm not sure there's anything that's most complex top of mind. One thing I can tell you for sure is every entrepreneurial journey is complex. It's never straight up. There are always ups and downs. Even my life, like people would think, oh, it's like continued success, but like I went bankrupt multiple times. I lost everything I've made. and I got sued for billions of dollars while I was running a company. I mean, it's hard, and you're going to face challenges. It's always complex, and I don't want to take away from other entrepreneurs by saying, "Oh, this one is the most complex." I think everyone who's an entrepreneur knows how hard it really is to do, because not only do you need to do what your job, there's so many other things you need to deal with as a founder that are frankly painful. Like many people, also if you build a mom and pop, they love cooking. You're like, I'm going to build a restaurant. And then you realize how hard it is because you have all this admin stuff that you didn't realize you needed to do, like file the taxes and do payroll and abide by labor laws and local regulations. I mean, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur, but it's also really fun.
Exactly. So one last question here. Okay. They're asking, what categories do you prefer to invest? Tech, real estate, healthcare?
So here's what's funny is I invest in every category. I'm not industry specific. I'm business model specific. So I invest in every stage, in every geography, the large countries mostly, in every industry, but with marketplaces. And the reason I choose marketplaces is as an economist by formation, I like the level of liquidity and transparency and value that you can create by bringing buyers and sellers together. And I mean buyers and sellers in the large sense of the word. It could be a supplier of a service, of a product, or of anything. Because when you create liquidity and transparency in opaque, fragmented markets, you unleash a lot of value. And also, the business models are way more capital efficient, right? If you want to build an Amazon, it is so hard, right? Like you need logistics, inventory, supply chain management, payments. If you want to build a marketplace, it's way more asset light, and they're really powerful network effects. And so I love marketplaces, and I love them in every industry. Whether it could be in healthcare, we're investors in a company called Medinas, which is a used medical equipment marketplace. It could be it could be in fintech, where investors in a company called Clearbank that does lending to small businesses based on the profitability of their advertising on Shopify, their Shopify sites, and their advertising on Google and Facebook. I mean, it really. It's all industries are interesting. We're at the very beginning of the tech revolution in general. I mean, think of how much of education is online. It's like 0%. How much of real estate is online? It's like discovery a little bit, and everything else is offline. How much of food is online? You have like 3-4% of food that's being ordered online. That's it. It's going to go to 50%. Even e-commerce, where you have the likes of Amazon, it's only 15% penetration in the US. That's going to go to 50. So we're at the very, very beginning of the tech revolution, and everything remains to be built. As Jeff Bezos would say, we're day one.
Great. Well, Fabrice, thank you so much for taking part of your time in beautiful charts and sharing with us all this knowledge. And hopefully we'll see you here back one day, at least for a drink or something.
Great. Thank you. I still come more sort of while to go kiting in Cabarete, so maybe one of these days.
One of these days. Is the wind there good, like in Cabarete, or so?
Cabarete is amazing. It's windy every day. There's a wind machine where every day it comes up at 1 p.m. until 6 and then turns off at 6. I mean,
no, but I mean in Turks.
Oh, Turks. Well, I was worried that maybe the wind would pick up my microphone. It's not as good at Cabarete, but there's a lot of wind. I mean, obviously the reason I'm here, and I'll swap. The reason I'm here is to kite. This is the kiting beach. In fact, one of my friends who's also a VC is about to go kiting. So the wind is not as good at Cabernet, but it's pretty good. I still kite a couple times a week. It's great.
Great. Thank you so much, Fabrice.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.